The word brothel or le bordel is French, and it's no coincidence that this invention comes from there. In translation, the name of the variety of leisure places sounds like tiny pleasure house. A large pleasure house was pronounced bord in the Saxon language, popular in far eastern France. And yes, the kingdom's brothels were pretty tiny. Catholic kings hated open forms of prostitution, but the kingdom turned into a republic. This is flip side of history. Welcome to the channel. Today, the main topic of the episode is brothels and history of France. Let's continue this episode. Brothels from the inside. As we have already hinted, prostitution had a contradictory status before the modern era. But it was the French Enlightenment that removed the contradictions between faith and humanism as a whole. Therefore, in the first years of the 19th century, there were up to 200 brothels in Paris alone. In the 19th century, these establishments began to compete with each other. From tiny houses for specific entertainment, they increasingly turned into palaces. But this wasn't enough. In order to somehow stand out from the rest, some owners arranged special rooms inside, stylized as exotic states. This created the illusion of travel. After all, in the first half of the 19th century, Romanticism was at its peak. Ancient Egypt, China, tropical India, all of it can be reached with just a few steps. The guest could be anywhere with a temporary lover. But it's not just about the interiors. For special guests, exotic equipment was also provided, boxes on which it is convenient to make all sorts of turns and movements from the Kama Sutra. But this, of course, is only for the dearest visitors, among whom there were even princes. The 19th century prostitutes are still called the ones who were living in the perfect epoch. You could sit naked on the windowsills of the wide-open windows overlooking the large streets. One window, one night butterfly. This fashion, by the way, was adopted by the Dutch. On red light district, priestesses of love stand in shop windows. Women's daily life in brothels. The guardians of order closed only illegal brothels. If the hostess paid taxes and her establishments and employees met all the requirements, there was no friction with the ruling authorities. By the way, about the authorities themselves, the police complied a card index for all prostitutes. Mysterious strangers had no place in this business. Doctors examined the priestesses of love for contagious and other diseases twice a month, and then even once a week. The only thing for which a legal prostitute could be punished was for ordinary offenses. Some butterflies aggressively harassed passers-by and were rude to those who refused their services, and sometimes insulted a person in bed. Why the hostess and not the male owner? According to one of the laws of France, only women could run houses of tolerance. They were collectively called mothers. But a man could also live in the building if he was the legal spouse of the hostess. He served as an assistant to the head woman. But even an unmarried mother wasn't obliged to act as a prostitute herself, although most of them used to work as prostitutes in the past. Ladies and more mature women in separate beautiful rooms only served visitors and nothing else. They usually slept in one large room, much more modest, which looked like a barracks according to the papers of buildings which are still preserved to this day. Their children could live alongside them, but only older children. The little ones had no place in the houses of tolerance. And about the staff, a license was obtained by an institution where there were at least 2 employees. People in any uniform, whether military, police, or even a gymnasium student uniform, were not allowed in this place. However, servicemen could enter these special rooms but with a separate permit. And in the First World War, soldiers and officers generally became the main contingent among the customers. Disgrace threatened an important client, but the courtesan serving him, obviously having become famous on the country, became influential and at the same time pretty wealthy. Pricing and various clients. There was a different clientele in the brothels. For those who had more money, a special huge range of services was provided. Nobility or wealthy entrepreneurs came to France from all over the world, and not just from Europe. Prostitution was legalized to such an extreme degree with all the benefits only in France. Princes of European kingdoms, Grand Dukes, Rajas, Oriental oligarchs, and etc. were welcomed here. Pricing, therefore, was quite logical, in this case according to possibilities. The slaughterhouses, the lowest brothels in the hierarchy, differed in the prices that farmers and laborers could afford, but the palaces like Le Chevanet were waiting for only exceptional guests, those who were supposed to be an example for the people since they had royal blood. Well, many of these noble individuals were married. Well, now, a little note here. We can all laugh. In general, you pretty much guessed it after the previous sentence. We are talking about mysterious clients. They paid hundreds of times more for 3 reasons at once. First, for special taste and service. Second, for workers capable to make their fantasies come to life. Oh, and third, for silence. The main scandal associated with this kind of clients was the story of the womanizer Edward VII. By the way, the above-mentioned strange sex beds were made by special order just for this client. The mentioned aristocrat was the eldest son of the mistress of the largest empire in the world, of the British Empire. Victoria and her staff who tracked her son around the world in order to prevent shame upon this mighty power failed to do so. Yes, France was a paradise for people from places where extramarital affairs were severely punished. But first of all, brothels were adored by the French themselves. Guy de Maupassant came up with his best themes here, and the artist Toulouse-Lautrec didn't want to leave mistresses of love alone. Intrigues and scandals. Back then, there was such a phenomenon as morality police that wasn't only in the United States or the countries of the Islamic world. There was something similar in France. These people followed both high-ranking clients and prostitutes serving them. Organized groups of Catholic judgmental characters were more terrible than the official police. These people didn't want to accept the fast-paced changes in society of that era, and therefore many prostitutes even threw themselves out of the window, becoming victims of their persecution. It was the fighters against brothels who revealed the secrets of many of the intrigues taking place here, giving them publicity. Newspaper reporters immediately profited from these scandals. It turns out that it was possible to take any politician out of the game if you paid someone from such a morality police. It also turned out that these saints who fight corruption love money very much. So now we already understand that political visitors were victims of the most ordinary corruption from the side of saints, however it may sound. For their holy criticisms, funds were paid, and sometimes the mothers themselves set a price for their silence. Apparently, brothels gradually turned into an accidental tool for the struggle for political power. The high-profile proceedings of those years were associated with another shameful phenomenon. Often there were underage girls in the brothel, for whom passports with an increased age were created. So orphans got here thanks to guardians, and often the institution of leisure spat on the law and allowed them to keep the younger children off prostitutes. People were brought up on the fact that the best love is the one which is traded. But the loudest intrigue out of all associated with Belle Époque concerns the troubles that are characteristic of today as well. Among the prostitutes there were often illegal immigrants, to whom the institution bought both a card and certificates of past medical examinations. The place was considered so profitable that the wife of one of the high-ranking French officials worked here. Finally, the authorities of many cities have become ashamed in front of decent residents and guests because of the fact that either the bare buttocks or the naked breasts of female workers hang invitingly from the windows of the House of Tolerance. The commune councils began to insist that prostitutes close the windows, but more often the requests were not fulfilled. The brothel could not deny itself effective promotion. Consequently, it resulted in conflicts. The end of the brothel epoch. In the second quarter of the 19th century, a very old movement for the abolition of slavery gained power. The fact is that, having abolished open slavery, they began to use its closed forms, and then they got to prostitution. Abolitionists are sure that at the time of customer service, the place of a woman from a brothel does not differ from the status of a slave. She'll do whatever client desires. Further, it gained even more power. Rallies, peaceful demonstrations, articles, published studies appeared. In the wake of the opposition to brothels, many politicians rolled out to power. Some scientists wrote dissertations, and some journalists received recognition based on their writings concerning this issue. It was specifically in France that the struggle for women's rights escalated in the 1920s. In 1925, brothels were banned in some districts of cities. As you may have guessed, in the first place, those of them were closed, where customers simply liked to play slave owners and slaves. And at this time, spouses who owned establishments could afford to live in palaces and even castles. Later, there were fewer brothels, they were more modest, and lives of prostitutes were even more strictly regulated by law. Thank you for watching this episode on Flip Side of History. Enjoyed this one? Check out other episodes we've posted. Subscribe as well as leave a like, and see you later.